Hello everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thank you for joining me here today. This is your one-stop shop for cryptocurrency analysis, among other things. Now what we're taking a look at here is RLC. I reviewed this a few days ago and it has made significant recovery, you could say. We're going to take a closer look at that and obviously understand best practice and of course try to find a good entry point for you too, because this is still very much alive, right? So again, let's go ahead and check that out. Before we do, of course, I am not a financial advisor. I have years of trading experience, but this is for educational purposes only, right? My goal is to help make you more of an effective trader. Always do your own research nonetheless, okay? If you'd like $25 in Bitcoin, there's a link in the description below. Also, my Patreon account if you'd like to show your support. And furthermore, my Telegram community, my wonderful Telegram community. You guys are all awesome. Thanks again for recommending that I cover this. So moving forward, let's go ahead and check it out. Without further ado, let's get right to it. All right, folks, let's go ahead and take a look at RLC. And just before we do, we always take a look at Bitcoin and Ethereum, just to kind of get perspective on how those are doing. Just obviously because of the fact that Bitcoin is essentially the catalyst for a lot of price movement. So it's helpful, I believe, to look at both sides so you understand how they're impacted by one another. And of course, Ethereum is helpful too, just based on the fact that a lot of coins that I cover are on the Ethereum network. Okay, so we'll take a look at those two things first. So let's take a look at Bitcoin. Now, as we all very well know, Bitcoin had a bit of a sell-off recently, and it was quite unfortunate. It does look like it's appearing to try to recover. There is a consolidation phase. It may not jump up from here per se, but it will likely progress upward, because I haven't marked this yet, but there is a potential support right in the range of about 47,000. Plus or minus a few hundred, but we're just going to mark this guy here because it touched on 4 points through this section. So future reference, support is roughly 47,500. Above and beyond that, we've still got 3 resistance lines to go. So we've got the previous support of 53,300. I got to get past that, and of course the biggest one, which was 57,000. And then the newest, most recent high of 59,500, that was tested quite a few times. So if we can get back up to this range here and then progress upwards from there, we'll be looking pretty good. But let's see how the moving averages are. And as you can see, as per usual, when we have a major sell-off like this, the price is definitely below all 3 moving averages, the 50, 100, and 200-day moving average. So really not much can be said right now. We still got some work to do, because the 200-day moving average appears to be like the strongest resistance and or support level that Bitcoin seems to follow. Because if you look back here, the 200-day it's continuously worked as a support, and now it's been fairly strong as a resistance. Even though it broke above, there was a slight variance there. We are looking at the price action underneath. So we'll see what happens, of course, but that is what's going on with Bitcoin. And I think it's helpful to note this just because the fact that when you go into RLC or any other coin, you want to know how Bitcoin is behaving, because obviously if it's doing poorly, a lot of times your altcoin will, but some altcoins bounce back real fast because the price is too low based on the fact that the average true range should be much higher. Because unfortunately a lot of people do this panic selling and just cause a state of hysteria. So that's why you'll see a lot of volatility in other markets based on Bitcoin selling off. It doesn't make sense logically, but big picture it does if you understand just kind of how the market works. Anyway, that's how Bitcoin is looking. Again, this is a 4-hour chart. Apologize, I forgot to preface that. 4-hour chart, and I'm using the Binance desktop application within TradingView. So the TradingView chart within the Binance application. All right, so let's look at the 4-hour chart for Ethereum. Now this is nice to see. Pretty normal too, of course. I mean, obviously this is kind of following Bitcoin's progression, but if you're not familiar with Ethereum, how that works, a lot of times when Bitcoin sells off, people invest heavily into Ethereum because it's the second largest coin, the largest altcoin essentially. So you'll see a big migration over here, which is why when Bitcoin was doing poorly, Ethereum was doing fantastic. So something to note if you're ever needing to invest in something or buy any type of dip when Bitcoin is doing poorly. As long as we're in a bull market, I would say that Ethereum is a pretty safe investment. ADA as well, of course, but that's a conversation for another day. I'll make a review video on that one again soon. But just to note here, we got a 50-day moving average that is working as a support. It has a fairly large variance, but that is mostly because of Bitcoin and having sold off. In fact, the 50-day moving average wouldn't have even been tested if it wasn't for Bitcoin doing what it did recently, right here with that first major sell-off. But good news is Ethereum's right around 4,000, which is essentially close to what the normal price should be right now based on the overall sentiment. 4,300 was a little overextended. So we'll see the price likely work itself into this little channel for a moment and then probably ramp up even further past the previous all-time high of about 43.78. All right, that's the hope, right? Now let's go and take a look at RLC. And what we always do, if you're new to the channel, is I just take a look at the one-day chart and then the 4-hour chart, and we go down to the 15 and likely just the 1-minute chart to kind of identify some good entry point, best practice in this climate, because there's obviously a lot going on with RLC, but a lot of it's based on the overall movement of the market and just how fast it increased recently. I covered it roughly 3-4 days ago, and it had just passed or hit its all-time high of roughly, what is this, 1651. Okay. Now the price came way back down to roughly $6.54. Big ouch for a lot of people that are probably invested up here in the 12 to 15 range, but good news is it came back up to test the previous support, which is working as a resistance now, roughly at about 1160. We'll mark that a little closer when we look at a smaller time frame, but that's generally what's going on here. But just so you know, this is completely normal, completely, I guess, typical for price action that increase that fast. I mean, anytime you see, a currency move up this quick in this short amount of time, you can expect a retracement every single time. It's that whole Newton's law, what goes up must come down. I hope that's the right one. But it's essentially, it's almost like the gravity of cryptocurrency, right? If it goes up super hard, the stronger it's going to sell off. What we need is periods of consolidation, short periods of consolidation, day after day, in order for the price to slowly increase without noticing, kind of like a sleeping giant, so to speak, where it just slowly wakes up and within a couple weeks the price is quadrupled and you didn't even notice it. That's the kind of price movement you want for a bull run. This unfortunately was a crazy hyper extension, and it fell right down. Anyways, enough about that. Let's look at the indicators here. That's why we're here, of course, on the 1-day chart. Quickly note the moving averages, all three are trading below. Big surprise, that's normal when the price increases like this. We may see the 50-day moving average be tested within the next couple of weeks. It probably won't be anytime soon, as long as the price continues to average out. It is finding its average true range right now, and if you haven't noticed already, when there's a major increase like this, obviously the retracement occurs. But if you see that was a 238, approximately 238% increase in just these 2 days alone, right? So obviously it had to come back down. But what I'm trying to get at here is usually the price in cryptocurrency, whenever we have a significant increase like that, it almost always cuts itself in half. It's like a 60-40, 50-50 thing. So the price comes up here, so we can pretty much just split that difference, which is right here where the price action is, and that's usually where the average is, right? So it is roughly at its average true range now. So I would say be happy about that, because likely what I'm hoping to see is a bit of a consolidation here, because it ramped up it again recently. Let it calm down a little bit, let the RSI relax, and then ramp back up. It'll have to break this resistance level roughly at about 1160, 1165. All right, so just something to note. We'll look at that closer, but let's go ahead and remove that. And the RSI too, just a note, it's not over 70 yet. It's under 70 still, so we're still in decent shape. But I don't put a ton of weight into the 1-day chart RSI. The 4-hour and 15-minute makes much more sense as far as making a decision on an entry point. Again, we're looking at the 1-day chart just to get a bird's eye view on what's going on. Because if you don't understand the real big picture and you only look at the cellular level, you're not going to be able to make an informed decision. Okay. So don't put the cart before the horse. Now down below here, moving averages, the MACD, essentially moving average convergence divergence, is trending upwards. Again, big surprise, it didn't have enough time to calm down. But generally speaking, it does appear that we are still bullish on RLC. So looking at the 4-hour chart now, this is where it gets interesting, in a good way though, because the RSI is still under 70. That's awesome. Makes sense as to why it's still under 70, because it came up here and likely got rejected. The price got rejected at, again, 1163, roughly in that range there. So keep that in mind. Also bear in mind too, the MACD on the 4-hour chart does carry the most weight in the sense of just understanding the overall sentiment and the overall shift in market trend. In other words, if you see back here, obviously the green line is above the white line, and that essentially rose up. And once it rose up to the top, it peaked off, right? And it started to trail back down. So this basically tells us the momentum shifted bearishly, of course, big surprise, it ramped up too quick. And then of course, now that bearish sentiment is done, the last 2 or 3 days of massive selling off, the bears are exhausted and they're no longer trying to sell. They can't sell any further because the average true range was so low that the bulls are fighting back. And that's why you see the volume difference here, volume increase followed by green bars. That tells us the bulls are essentially back on track. But as you can see down here, try to zoom in there for you. This right here, when the bottom line swings upward and you see that those lines intersect, that's typically a good entry point for a swing trader if you're planning to go long with a position like this. Again, that's something you look for. Now, also bear in mind too, as a swing trader, you always want to have a 2-to-1 ratio for risk management. I'll have a future video on that, of course, because that's a really fundamental quality in making an informed decision when you are investing longer term. But suffice to say, the MACD and the RSI are all looking pretty good right now. I venture to guess the RSI is over 70 or hit over 70 on that 15-minute chart. We'll look at that next here, but currently all these indicators look fairly well. And bear in mind too, the 50-day moving average did work as a support level with a slight variance there. Even after all the Bitcoin sell-off, it was able to recover and hold true to its price. So suffice to say, we're looking at 761 as the current support level for the actual 50-day moving average. Yeah. Well, all right, so let's look at the 15-minute chart now. And this is my favorite chart, essentially, just for getting perspective on taking entry point. Of course, I like to look at the 1-minute chart to see the what's actually going on. But in this sense here, the 15-minute chart really helps us get perspective on generally what's happened recently. Okay, so obviously we see sometime yesterday, what is it, 6:45 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So sometime last night it started to kind of ramp up, and it has continued to ramp up. Now this is the right kind of increase that we see here. We see higher highs followed by higher lows. Anytime you see that, it does imply that the bulls are essentially in play, because anytime if you see higher highs, that's great, but if you don't see higher lows, then that can work out to be another retracement. But the fact that these lines on the bottom are still continuing upwards, in fact we could probably even mark that. Let's see. As you can see, the price, oops, sorry about that. Price action is looking pretty good there. So it's moving itself in an upward direction. And again, all these higher lows are very important to note, because that does imply that the bulls are in control. Another thing too to note as well is the RSI down below, right? So even though it's creeping up over 70, it keeps coming back down, calming down. So it has enough time to essentially consolidate and bounce off this support line. So the fantastic thing about this is, even though the RSI is a little overextended, more overextended than I would feel comfortable with taking entry, it really does tell us a lot about the fact that it is still continuing this momentous trend. And what we should expect to see soon is this resistance level at roughly, to say, I think it was 1160, 1150. That should get tested again in the near future, hopefully. And if it does, it'll test and either reject and break down, or it'll break up. Now, a lot of times when you have an upward wedge pattern like this, kind of a bullish pattern, then you will find that the price breaks up instead of down. So more often than not, you'll experience that. So my hope here is for the price to come up, test that resistance level, and if it does, and it stays consistent with consolidation, it'll eventually work itself into the corner of this wedge and break out in an upward fashion. Again, that's typical, that's no guarantee, but I can tell you that based on this previous resistance level being right here, and the fact that it was tested again recently, tells me that we'll be in pretty good shape. See, as you can see there, that pretty much intersect for the most part, because it was tested once, 2, 3 times, broken. As you can see, it was broken quite hard. In fact, let's take a look here. So this original resistance level, we'll just say 1160, 1165, plus or minus a few cents, came up, got tested, rejected, essentially worked itself into this pattern again. So you can see there's the same pattern forming. Same. So it broke in an upward fashion, and as you can see, it broke hard too. Oftentimes when a resistance level is tested multiple times, it becomes a stronger support level once it's broken, but furthermore, it's broken really quick, if that makes sense. I mean, that 15-minute time frame there, that was probably a good 10 to 15% increase right there. Then it broke above, tested the support level, and kept going. Now, obviously, it hit its maximum capacity, and we don't want to see that again over here. But preferably, if the price comes up and breaks out and breaks up above, then we might want to, consider averaging our positions down, or kind of obviously waiting and seeing. But I like this movement right here a lot better because it's not as overextended as something like this, for example. So just, if you think about the big picture and you try to understand what's going on here, it moved up way too quick, way too fast before. Now it seems to be on a steady pace. So I'd venture to guess that if it does break upwards, we'll see a period of consolidation after, or maybe even before, and then will likely continue up as long as we can break this resistance level of roughly 1160, 1165 range. So again, just pay attention to that. And also, again, the history tends to repeat itself, right? But it doesn't have to. And you'll hear me say that a lot because in cryptocurrency, patterns form and patterns reoccur a lot. Like, you can almost predict the future based on the previous patterns that have happened before. But you also have to understand how Bitcoin is affecting it too, because the price action recently, this major sell-off here, where it was probably planning to ramp back up, that happened because Bitcoin sold off. Okay? And everyone goes in this panic mode, and they sell all their altcoins because they think Bitcoin is tanking. I mean, it's a safe sentiment, of course, you could do that, but you'll lose a lot of profits if you don't find a good entry point. So oftentimes it's much better to hold as long as we're out in a bear market, right? But in this circumstance here, Bitcoin sold off pretty drastically, and it caused it to reach its most recent low. In fact, why don't we go ahead and mark that too, because I doubt we'll come back down there, but let's see what that looks like. Yeah, so right around 662 would be the strong support level if something were to happen again. But I think RLC is in pretty good shape, honestly. I really like this bull run. This momentum seems to be safe and controlled. It's not out of control, if that makes sense. I would like to see a period of consolidation either before it breaks this channel or above and breaks, because that would really help us understand the overall momentum. Because again, if you look back here and you look at this 15-minute chart here, after it broke its resistance level at 1165, it broke up, tried to sell back off, bounced off the support, and kept going. Okay, so we're really hoping for something like that. Again, once it either breaks this wedge pattern and or just consolidates further and then eventually breaks up. But just know that 1165, roughly that range there, is a very, very strong resistance level right now. But the more often resistance is tested, the stronger it will become a support. So if we see back here, it's tested 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5 times recently. So that's quite a lot. I think we're going to see something happen soon. So I'm bullish personally on RLC. And why don't we take a look at the 1-minute chart just kind of see what's going on here. And if you're new to the channel, I always like to use the volume weighted average price and of course the EMA line to identify a good entry point. Now you can use this on the 15-minute chart as well. I just feel like it's a little more effective as far as the EMA 15 is concerned on the 1-minute chart. But just a kind of quick history, if you're new to the channel, I just want to let you know that the volume weighted average price, my favorite indicator of all time, it works fantastically. It's this blue line down here. It works as a support line. And what it does is, of course, it can work as a resistance too. Bear that in mind. The price drops below, it becomes resistance. But it's essentially the volume over the volume weighted average. So in other words, it's the volume of the last 24 hours described as a continuous price. So the last 24 hours, based on the volume of the last 24 hours, the price should be roughly $9 right now. That's essentially what it's telling us. So with the price being over and up in like the 1060 range, it's slightly overextended, right? Now, why don't we take a look at the total percent here? Yep, and that's upwards of 19% between the VWAP and the current price action. So I would feel much more comfortable if the price were to continue to consolidate before taking entry and allow the volume weighted average price to increase and meet up with that and bounce off and work as a support level. The reason why I say that is because when you have a significant variance in between the price and the VWAP, then it can oftentimes retrace on you. Now it did retrace here, as you can see, with this difference in price. What was that? That was roughly somewhere like the low 30% range. So at this point, the price action got too high and too far away from the average price, what the average price should be based on the volume last 24 hours, and it got really, really extended. And then of course it came back down. You see a retracement there. Oftentimes the RSI reflects this as well. In fact, we look at the 15-minute chart. Yep, you can see there, hold on, let me zoom in for you. Right here, I'll mark that again, right at this 32% range, you see the RSI was overextended. So it was actually overextended a little bit before. So pay attention to the RSI on the 15-minute chart. It really helps you identify if something is considered to be overbought. Not to say it's going to absolutely retrace every time, because this is a bullish trend, so it didn't retrace very far. That difference is not that much considering. It might be maybe 8 to 10%. And the fact that it's consistently continuing and working itself above the EMA line and also staying in the support channel, it's looking really, really good. So I like the way that the price movement is heading here, but I don't love the fact that the VWAP line is so far away from the price action. I would really like for the price action to continue to work itself into this channel and the VWAP to come a little bit higher to catch up with the price, and then we see another increase above this resistance. Anyways, back to the 1 minute chart, just kind of finish my example on how the VWAP and the EMA lines work. Again, the VWAP support level, in a perfect world, the VWAP would come up and intersect with the price action and bounce off and continue upwards. That would be the best case scenario, because that would be so basically confirming your support, right? So we want that. But furthermore, on the 1 minute chart, something else to notice is the EMA line. Now, a lot of, I think, Binance or just say KuCoin, they'll use like the default on TradingView has like a 9 and a 20 for the EMA line, and which is the exponential moving average. So what I do is I just split the difference. I use the 15. It's always worked very well for me because there's less noise. Instead of seeing two little lines, I have one that's kind of essentially averaging out between the two. And it's worked out very well for me. So how it works essentially is the EMA line is it's an exponential moving average. So it basically tells us what the progression and the sentiment is in that little time frame. In other words, as you can see on this bullish run that it went on, the price was mostly over the EMA line, right? So it kept above that. Now that's what happens commonly on bull runs, and the inverse applies too for bear runs too, right? So if we see here, it retraced because, as we identified already, it was over 30% from the VWAP line here. So it had to retrace. It was overextended, considered to be overbought. So the price levels itself out. And in this progression here, if you see this, the price lost EMA and stayed below. It tried to break above, but it didn't get confirmation, continued to stay below. Now we have confirmation and it's above that line, and it's been tested, and it's tested it already twice. And when I say confirmation, and if you're new to the channel, what I'm referring to is at least 3 solid green bars in the 1 minute chart. So if we see this first green bar here, that is a solid green bar that closed above the EMA line. Okay. Let me see if I can zoom in a little further. There we go. So this guy right here, so that's confirmation 1, right? And we need 3 solid green bars in a row to take entry, right? That's usually what I do. So I wait for this one to close, second one to close, and the third one to close. So if you take all 3 of these, essentially, that is closing above the EMA line. And what that does, that tells me that we're having enough momentum where the price action has shifted to be above the EMA line. Okay. So as soon as that happens, I would likely take entry right in this range here. Okay. And again, the main reason why I do that is because the price action came up above. I take a small entry point here, and I wait to see if the EMA line is tested again. It was tested and rejected here and stays above. So what should likely happen is the price action should stay above for a little while longer and continue above this EMA line. And as soon as the price drops below the EMA line, I consider selling my entry, depending on how much progression I've made, right? So in this case, it's kind of a break even almost. So if the price comes back down here and loses it, then I'm out, and that's okay. That's not a big deal. you got to learn to take your losses, and the important thing is to mitigate your loss. So with risk management, if you are, just say you're wanting to do a 10% gain, you want to lose no less than 5%. It's always a 2-to-1 ratio. So in this scenario, how to take an entry, I'd be considering exiting my position right here. Okay. Again, you don't have to do this. This is kind of just something that works well for me on the 1-minute chart. But I commonly prefer to take entry on the 15-minute chart and wait for 2 solid 15-minute green bars before I do that. And again, same thing applies, right? You want to be above, you actually want to be above the price action, above the support level, and ensure that you are not working directly under a resistance. Okay, so let's look at the 15-minute chart again. And as you can kind of see here, right, in this price movement here, the second 15-minute bar hasn't closed green yet. So hypothetically, had I used the 15-minute chart, I wouldn't be in a position where the price action would be wavering. I would have that confirmation and know that it's coming upwards. So I hope that makes sense. I try to make it as simple as possible because, again, the EMA line is very helpful in understanding the overall sentiment. It's kind of similar to the volume weighted average price. It's just exponential, so it moves faster, moves with the price action. So that's why EMA lines are beneficial, even more so than an actual moving average, which can be used over the course of days, not hours. Okay. So just something to note, you add this to your skill set, hopefully, but I can tell you that I am bullish on RLC. I feel like it's going to continue to funnel into this wedge pattern, and it will likely break up. That's kind of the common trend. But if just say it hits this resistance level and doesn't continue past, and it starts to sell off, then pay attention to how the volume weighted average price is treating it. So the price could very well reject off of this this resistance level of 1160, 1165, and it could come crashing back down and test the VWAP and bounce off. So in other words, the VWAP is kind of like a secondary moving support with the price action, because it tells you what the average true range should be and what the price really is supposed to be based on the average volume. And right now it's a little bit on the overextended side, but it's normal because we're making higher highs and higher lows. So if you find this beneficial, please let me know in the comments below. I'm going to have more content moving forward regarding training and helping you understand these specific indicators I'm trying to identify here: the volume weighted average price, the moving averages, EMA lines, RSI, MACD, and all that, just so we can have kind of a well-rounded knowledge to make more of an informed decision, because I've lost plenty of money in my day and I want to make sure that you don't. And that's my whole goal for this, is to just make sure we're all profitable, right? Because this is definitely there's no exact science, but there's a lot of little things you can do to swing things in your favor. And that's the whole point. So thanks again for watching. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and we'll see you in the next video. You take care.